Thank you all for coming. This is a very important event that is going on, and I hope that everyone during testimony time is encouraged to testify.
Today's Poor People's hearing is dedicated to two fallen warriors in the fight against poverty and for a just society, Chris Brown and Keith Welch. Both Keith and Chris were strong advocates for Laney students, for Oakland, for the poor and for the working class, for the African American community, in unity with students and disenfranchised people of all ethnic and racial backgrounds. They both had love and pride in their community. They were a part of the Umoja Ubaka Student Success Community at Laney and many other things. Chris was our first staff assistant at Umoja, and he made the village into the loving, celebrative African diasporic space that it is. Keith was a frequent participant in Umoja workshops. Both Chris and Keith were members of the Laney Teach-In Committee, who played important leadership roles. Chris Brown was a founding member and was an ASLC senator when we had our very first teach-in on the Flint lead crisis. Keith became more active later around the Oakland A's stadium and around student hunger and homelessness. Both Keith and Chris were part of the successful fight to stop the Oakland A's stadium, the Oakland A's Corporation as we understand it, and the luxury housing and shop development that the billionaire owners tried to bring with them. Chris and Keith were both leaders in the battle that we won against private corporations, taking over public schools, public land that is supposed to be dedicated to public education for the Oakland community. I really got to know Keith during the Oakland A's fight. He was patient in the struggle. He and other student leaders felt pressure from administrators to not take a position against the A's stadium. He moved forward with a student survey that of course showed that students were opposed to it. Testifying against the A's stadium at the Peralta Board of Trustees meeting, Keith shed tears and expressed himself clearly, sharing how Laney had saved his life. Keith talked about spending many years living on disability and in poverty, and he wanted something more. He went back to school and began fighting for his life and for others. He also said one of my favorite lines in our struggle, to paraphrase, "The Oakland A's say they want to give Laney culinary arts students some jobs. Well, I didn't spend all this money and get all this culinary arts training to sell hot dogs at a baseball game." Keith loved to cook, and he understood that many students at Laney didn't have enough food to eat. He organized food banks and food giveaways on campus to feed hungry students. He founded the Culinary Arts Club, which also provided food to students. He ran for student body president on a platform to make sure students had free access to healthy food and to fight for students who are homeless. Keith Welch passed away on February 25th, 2018, and this hearing is dedicated to his memory. Today's hearing is also dedicated to our brother, Chris Brown, the real Chris Brown, as we call him, a shining light at Laney College and in the hearts of many of his friends, colleagues, and comrades. Chris Brown left this world on June 15th, 2018, in Davis, California, where he had just finished his second quarter at UC Davis. Chris defined himself as a poet, a writer, a proud African male, a proud same-gender loving male, an English tutor, and an anti-capitalist. Chris was all that and more.
Chris was a proud Oakland native whose family had been pushed out of Oakland by the gentrification crisis. He was a humble intellectual and a revolutionary. Chris graduated from Laney in 2016 and then worked as our inspirational Umoja staff person. Chris planned to attend graduate school and to return to Laney College as an English professor. He already was a professor in many ways. He shared political education with all those he could reach. Chris Brown was a revolutionary for a new society where the technology and abundant wealth created by humanity would be used for all. Chris knew who he was, and he understood that all people who must work for a living are connected and must understand that connection to work together to get what we need. He loathed the social injustice occurring in our communities, in our country, and in the world. To close this dedication, I'd like to invite Professor Jackie Graves. Thank you. Professor Jackie Graves was one of Chris's favorite professors in the English department. And Chris wrote this poem. It's called Gentrification.
Gentrification by Chris Brown. As time goes by, I see less and less of my people in my neighborhood. I'm not saying similar to lift up crosses and burn down lawns. I'm saying, why are they trying to convince my grandma to sell? She's been there my whole life. And now, 3 skaters, 2 bikers, a chick with 30 tats, and a dude that somehow has 6 nipple rings. I don't blame them. They need somewhere to live just like we do. I blame the crooked system that made it okay to go after Social Security checks and dead men's pensions. I blame the crooked politicians that made messed up laws that turned poor or poorly educated kids into gang members, violating their civil rights and telling them they can't live in their own neighborhood, forcing them into jails that they hold stock to, that they privately own, enforcers stealing from the righteous when they themselves are the real kingpins. This is what I mean when I say gentrified. Neighborhoods taken from the poor, the minority, given over to the trendy, the chic, the hip, the cool, the sons and daughters of the wealthy. Meanwhile, as the ghetto adopts trendy as an adjective, the sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, all the children of the ghettos wonder, where can they now take refuge? Wonder, where can they now afford to call home? Thank you.
So as I said before, so once again, welcome. I can't say that enough because the world we're living in now, there's so many places where we're not welcome. It's critical to say welcome.
Yeah.
So this is the public hearing. It's public hearing part 2 of the Poor People's Campaign. The first hearing was at Taylor Memorial Church. So it's the second hearing. It's a chance, an opportunity for you to make your voice heard. It is critical that you make your voice heard because a whole lot of folks are speaking that it speaks total hate. So we need to hear your voice because you're the next generation coming up. So if you don't speak, we're in a hell of a lot of trouble. The crisis, there's an urgency, and you probably see it in your social media, you probably see it in your various areas of interest. We have an urgent need for people to stand up and speak. As Pastor Ann said, We cannot be silent anymore. We cannot afford to be silent. And why is that? Well, some of your Laney students, fellow students, are sleeping in cars. Some of your fellow Laney students are probably having immigration issues. Some of your fellow Laney students are having health care problems. So the urgency and the crisis, which is a moral crisis, is not something on Fox News or MSNBC, it's right here. Now, listening to Professor King on the radio yesterday, great job, fantastic job, on KPFA. And she spoke about the aid state and trying to build to put Laney out of business. Laney is at risk more than anyone else. Oh, they may have stopped right now, but they're going to be back. Public education is under attack.
Come on now, say that.
Folks are actually trying to shift the conversation to charter schools. Oh, we love charter schools. We don't want public schools. We are in crisis. It's urgent. And so today is your opportunity to speak and make your voice heard. So instead of going home all upset and high blood pressure, do something. Speak. Now, we have testimonies to us sent in testimonies. Thank you very much for sending your testimonies in. But also, if you need to say something, well, we'll have space for that also. But we need to take this time in America seriously. And many, and I get it, I mean, I'm a former veteran, I was in the military, I offer this so-called democracy, I get it. But it's a problem. When we don't speak, other people get to speak and get heard. And so, I don't want to belabor the point, but the most important thing is to hear your voice. To hear what you're thinking. And so what we're going to do right now is set the stage. So, Arthur Long Scott, retired journalist and reporter, an extraordinarily gifted human being. He's going to give an overview of the Souls of Poor Folk audit. Austin, please come.
Thank you, Monica. I like that introduction. I want to explain to you why I'm speaking today. Although I don't look it, I was born at the beginning of 1939, which means that back in January, I turned 80 years old. And thank you for that. And I spent my working life as a journalist, which means that 55 years ago, when I was reporting on the Harlem Rebellion in New York City, at age 25, there were people marching in protest down tenement-lined avenues, screaming and hurling rocks and bottles in frustration against murder and police brutality and the lack of jobs and segregated housing. I was really reporting on the effects of persistent, unending, stifling poverty that had persisted from the days of slavery. That Harlem Rebellion set off a series of African American urban rebellions in cities around the country. 3 years later, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated after declaring a rebellion against poverty. His Poor People's Campaign, the first one, set up an encampment of 3,000 plywood huts on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., right in front of all the tourists who come to see the Lincoln Memorial. And I was there reporting. Who knew that encampment would anticipate Oakland's tough sheds and be the forerunner of thousands of tent encampments in cities all over the country? The point is that in my entire lifetime, none of the people who run the country have been serious about ending poverty. They just run poor people from one phony promise to another. In 1965, when the late President Johnson promised a war on poverty, there were 35 million Americans classified as poor. Today, there are officially 43 million, and 100 million if you count people who are near poor. Today, it is time for the dispossessed to unite in stopping this shoveling of misery on people who dare to dream. Now, why are the poor always with us? History tells us the American dream was never intended for everybody. The richest nation the world has ever known still creates great walls of denial for so many hopeful people, because every generation of Americans invents new tools to make sure some groups of people will enjoy comfort, wealth, and power at the expense of other groups of people who will be fighting misery on many fronts. The new Poor People's Campaign that gathers us here today has produced a big study on American misery. It looks at how and why misery is distributed in America. And as it says, 50 years after the original Poor People's Campaign challenged racism, poverty, the war, militarism, and our national morality. They named this study of misery as a tribute to the great African-American scholar W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois wrote a famous book, The Souls of Black Folk, which focused on the forced separation between white and black in America. The Poor People's Campaign study is called The Souls of Poor Folk. It focuses on the forced separation between the haves and the have-nots in America. It's a study in how the owning class makes war on the working class, resulting in people of all ethnicities suffering from a common poverty that spreads misery over almost half the people in the country. Now, The Souls of Poor Folk is a very big study. It's a 123-page PDF with pictures. And it goes into gripping detail about the shameful conditions of the new common poverty. It looks at systemic racism, at poverty, at inequality, at militarism, at the war economy, at ecological devastation. And one of the things it says is that the immoral part of our nation, the part that ginned up profits by keeping people oppressed primarily because of their race, is changing. It's still there, as we all know. But the main effort today is to oppress the entire working class by increasing the number of people in poverty. You hear all these calls today for austerity when it comes to spending money for the public good, even though corporate profits and CEO salaries have never been higher. The thing about common poverty today is that it is a tool of dispossession. These calls we hear for austerity for workers are being used to dispossess people of their ability to make a decent living, deny them the ability to take good care of their families, interfere with their ability to protect and educate their children. It is even separating people from the basic needs of life, like going hungry and going without safe water in places like Flint, Michigan. It's affecting people of all races, of all cultures, and it is sucking people from more and more walks of life into a downhill spiral. A lot of things enable common poverty. Public silence is one enabler. There were 25 debates in the 2016 primary and general elections, and poverty was not a significant focus of any of them. The language of public debate is skewed. As the Souls of Poor Folk says, some things are not right versus left, but right versus wrong. And you've heard Monica talk eloquently about the need to raise your voices. Denial of democracy is another common enabler of poverty. Look at all the impediments being placed in the way of people's right to vote. In the Souls of Poor Folk, the Poor People's Campaign co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, says, and I quote, "The poor are facing severe cuts to basic social services. Millions of people are living without clean water and sanitation services. Voting rights are being suppressed, and wars are being waged across the world and intensifying. These and many other crises mean it is urgent we build a Poor People's Campaign today." Now, 50 years ago, Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign said it well. The statement said, "We come to protest in Washington, D.C. on behalf of," and I quote, "Americans who are the too long forgotten, hungry and jobless outcasts in this land of plenty. We come because poor fathers and mothers want a house to live in that will protect their children against the bitter winter cold, the searing heat of summer, and the rain that now too often comes in through the cracks in our roofs and walls. We have come here to say that we don't think it's too much to ask for a decent place to live at reasonable prices in a country with a gross national product of $800 billion. Now that was then. The gross national product is now almost $20 trillion. And then continuing to quote, "We don't think it's too radical to want to help to choose the type of housing and the location. We don't think it's asking for pie in the sky to want to live in neighborhoods where our families can live and grow up with dignity, surrounded by the kinds of facilities and services that other Americans take for granted." That was 50 years ago. Now what?
We now begin to get into the speaking and testifying to make your voice heard. I introduce to you Professor Kimberly King, who will be the moderator. Oh, and Sabrina Iga will be the moderator for this section.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Monica. This is not working. Oh, thank you, Monica. So Sabrina and I are just going to be beginning the part about housing insecurity and homelessness. So if you, many of our students and community members suffer from this in Oakland, and we're going to be asking, after we give a few comments, we're going to be asking for testimony about your experiences with housing insecurity and homelessness. So if you have a story to share, if you could please stand along that wall there and get ready, and we're going to put a mic up there to give a testimony of 2 to 3 minutes. Sabrina.
So the Poor People's Campaign are rooted in the 12 principles, and it's behind the program sheet that you guys received. So homelessness and housing insecurity is within the number 5 of the Poor People's Campaign fundamental principles. We believe that people should not live in or die from poverty in the richest nation ever to exist. Blaming the poor and claiming that the United States does not have an abundance of resources to overcome poverty are false narratives used to perpetuate economic exploitation, exclusion, and deep inequality.
Oakland's homeless population is estimated at a little less than 3,000, and that's an underestimate, many of us believe. Yeah. Over 300 of those counted were children. 68% of them were black. When there's only 28% black people in Oakland now, but 68% of the homeless are black. The United Nations sent a special rapporteur on adequate housing, and she visited Oakland's homeless encampments last January. And she described the situation, the homeless situation in Oakland, to the East Bay Express as systemic cruelty. This woman travels all over the world, and she defined the homeless situation in Oakland as systemic cruelty. She noted that it's especially cruel because of the contrast. We have so many wealthy corporations here, like Google, Apple, Facebook, Wells Fargo, and Chevron, just to name a few. Many millionaires and billionaires. There's over 16,000 new units being built. Only about 6% of them are affordable housing. This crisis is happening in Oakland and around the country in all major cities and even in suburbs and rural areas. At the same time, few national candidates are even talking about this. Have you heard any of our presidential candidates talk about they need to end homelessness? I'm glad, I hope they start talking about it. It's a shame. Why is Trump saying there's a national emergency on the border and not noticing there's a national emergency in our cities? There's a national emergency in our encampments. There's a direct connection between the corporations and the rising rents and the cost of housing and the rise of homelessness. People sleeping in their cars. We have to do something about this. We have the abundance needed in our society to not only house every man, woman, and child, but to provide housing, food, public education, and health care for every man, woman, and child, and non-gender binary person. The government should guarantee housing and stable lives for everyone. The battle for housing for all is in reality a fight for a transformed society where all of us have the absolute right to housing and everything we need for full, creative, and abundant lives. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Carol Johnson from the St. Mary's Center, and Carol's going to say a few words, and then I'm asking people who want to testify about your experience. We'd love to hear your personal experience with housing insecurity and homelessness to stand right along there. Ms. Carol Johnson.
Thank you very much. For over the past 25 years, I've been associated with St. Mary's Center in West Oakland, which has been operating here for over 70 years, serving extremely low-income families, preschoolers, and seniors. It was in the early 1980s that St. Mary's began its outreach to homeless seniors, most often hidden in silence and isolation. At that time, most homeless people were not seen or recognized as homeless by an untrained eye. It wasn't until after the 1989 earthquake that service providers in our county came together in the Emergency Services Network to begin to address the crisis of increasing numbers of people having no place to live. This crisis, recognized then, as many of you have been experiencing, has steadily become more serious, to the point that we now see a proposal to allow our students to live in their cars on campuses, assuming that they have a car, And it was already noted that our visit from the United Nations rapporteur was quite embarrassing to the city of Oakland. It was in 1998 that St. Mary's Center opened its emergency winter shelter specifically for older adults with 25 cots. People who are aged, blind, and disabled. Guests were supported with food, case management, and helped to secure permanent housing, along with mental health counseling, recovery services, and assistance with money management. In those early years, finding another place to live in Oakland was actually possible, most often probable, but now it requires years of waiting. In 2008, the Oakland Institute, along with the seniors at St. Mary's Center, published Growing Gray in the Golden State, which focused on SSI. So SSI, or Supplemental Security Income, a needs-based program, and is something that most of our seniors at St. Mary's Center depend on. Just a little definition. SSI is a federal program designed to help older adults, old people, blind people, disabled people who have little or no income to meet their basic needs. The state-funded portion of this program is called the State Supplementary Payment, SSP. Now, California's monthly grant to this population is now $100 a month below the federal poverty line, because our legislators cut the state portion of the monthly grant and eliminated the cost of living adjustments in 2009. These cuts have pushed more than 1.3 million blind, aged, and disabled Californians below the federal poverty line and come at a high cost to communities around the state by forcing recipients to rely on emergency public services and private networks to meet food, shelter, and health needs. Since 2008, the state portion of the SSI grant has been cut each year by $1.4 billion, all absorbed by people forced to make difficult trade-offs between food, housing, and medicine. It seems clear that the best way to help California's poor older adults, blind and disabled, is to stop stealing from them. St. Mary's seniors have testified that they spend most all of what they receive in their own community and therefore enrich their local economy with all that they have. They are also keenly aware that just increasing their monthly income is not enough. With others around the country, they've been identifying the multi-dimensions of poverty: access to health care, housing, safe neighborhoods, education, transportation. Tomorrow, you are invited to join them at St. Mary's Center on San Pablo Avenue at 1:30 for the national release of the multi-dimensional aspects of poverty pushed to the bottom. So I hope you can join us, and I thank you.
People that are living in the streets typically are not there because they choose to be there. People are there because they have been forced out of their seats. All of you are being forced out of your seats. You're getting to experience a little bit, just a little taste of what it's like to be forced to move. The definition in the library, in the dictionary of a refugee, is a person who is forced to move from his home, either through political, through war, there's a number of reasons. So what we see in our streets become, I don't call it homeless, I call it houseless. Because every one of you grew up in a home with your parents. You don't live there anymore, that's not your home. Your home is where you are. What you don't have is a house. So these people are houseless refugees. And if we start thinking about them in that way, in those terms, then we have a different way of looking at them. They're not just people, they're not just things, they're not objects laid on the side of the street. They are actually human beings that came from disadvantaged situations that brought them and forced them into these conditions. We need to change our attitude if we want to change the situation. Because as long as you hang on to your back seats and refuse to move and do not decide to become uncomfortable, you will stay in your comfort zone and do nothing.
Come on.
Thank you.
He did such a great job, and so let's have one more testimony before the speakers of the survey.
Hello, Laney, and community. I'm Amy Marshall, a lady student, and I'm a survivor of homelessness. I'm also enduring housing insecurity. I'm enduring housing insecurity because of the low wages that I make, because I choose to be my mother's caregiver. My mother's in a nursing home, but for her to get the care she deserves, family must be involved.
That's right.
And I have to be flexible enough. And in order for me to be flexible enough, I need to take a job or have a job that will allow me to come and go. Because if I have a traditional job, I will lose that job because of absenteeism. So because I make low wages, and because I choose to be a caregiver, I have so much anxiety over the housing that I do have, because as an Uber driver, I am one catastrophe away from back to being homeless. So today, I show my face and I tell you my experience, because I like to honor those in my community that just can't bring themselves to reveal themselves. There's so many that feel that I've seen that just cannot bring themselves to tell others the horrors that they're experiencing, or even are aware that the couch surfing that they're doing is considered homelessness, or being with somebody because you can't do it on your own. Forced in relationships, that is a form of being housing insecure.
Yes.
But I'm one of the lucky ones, because I have a loving support system at Laney. I have a therapist that I see twice a week, and I have a home for now.
So we're going to continue the testimony after the students from, who are these students? These are students from the Umoja program, Math 13. Math 13 class. And I'm pleased to, that our statistics professor, Ms. Christine Will, and math faculty member Anna Werner worked with the students to make this happen, and so I'm going to turn it over to the students and the professors. Thank you.
There you go.
Hey everybody, I'm Lisa, and I'm a student in Ms. Will's class, and I'm here today with Daryl and Monique, and we're going to give you some statistics information. So this was a class project that we put together in Christine Will's class. We're all part of the Umoja program. And again, we want to give special thanks to Anna Werner for her help in collecting and analyzing the Peralta District data. So just to give you some information about the Umoja program, Umoja is a student success learning community, and we promote self and community empowerment through an affirming atmosphere and culturally responsive curriculum specifically focused on the Black experience. Economic insecurity survey, that's what we're looking at today. We analyzed a sample of 37 Laney College students from May 15th, 2018, who attended a teach-in the Laney cafeteria and responded to a survey. And the survey was economic insecurity, an economic insecurity survey. Definitions. Homelessness means that a person is without a place to live, often residing in a shelter, an automobile, an abandoned building, or outside. Housing insecurity includes a broader set of challenges such as the inability to pay rent or utilities or the need to move frequently. All of these challenges affect students, and the results of the survey from spring 2017 suggest that it is more common to have these challenges among the students at the Peralta colleges than to have all of one's housing needs met. Looking at this pie chart, we're looking at housing insecure versus homeless and housing secure. So we can see that the percentage of housing secure versus housing insecure is quite different. For housing insecure, we're looking at a percentage of 51.2, and 29% of Laney students surveyed were housing secure versus 51% who were housing insecure, while 19% were homeless. So this is another graph of homelessness, blacks versus all other ethnicities. Here we see that out of 37 students, the black students make up 8% of homelessness. And we see other ethnicities account for 10% of the 37 students. This is a marginal probability out of total surveyed. Homelessness, blacks versus all other ethnicities. Here we see that out of the homeless students, the black students make up 43% of homelessness. And we see the other ethnicities account for 57% of the homeless students. And this is a conditional probability out of homeless survey. And, okay. So this is Daryl, and he's gonna give you some more information.
Good afternoon, everyone. Daryl White, 27% of students who experienced housing insecurity were black, meaning that their housing situation was unstable, they lacked security, and knowing where they would live. As you can see by the numbers, there's a major difference. Okay, the age group with the most housing insecure students in it, at 26%, was the age group of 22 to 29. The age group with the least housing insecure students was equally represented by the age groups 18 to 22, and ages 30 to 39 at 16% each. Out of the homeless students, 14.3 were female and 85.7 were male. Large number. Here we have our housing insecurity factors: rent increase, underpaid rent, move-in with others. From our sample, we observed that numerous Laney students that are affected by the multiple housing insecurity factors. The biggest common factor that results in housing insecurity amongst the survey Laney students was rent increase at 89%. Homeless factors thrown out in shelters, evicted, or lives in abandoned buildings. 8 out of 37 students surveyed confirmed that they are suffering from homelessness. 2 students each have been either thrown out, stayed in the shelter, or been evicted from the home, or lives in an abandoned building. That is 25% of the homeless students surveyed in each category. Percentage of students by race who have been thrown out. This data highlights the percentage of each race that has been homeless due to being thrown out. Asian students had the highest percentage of students thrown out at 34%, but closely followed by black students at 28%. Laney versus Peralta homelessness. Sample data from Laney Tower newspaper and population data on the homelessness at Laney College and Peralta district. As you can see by the numbers, it tells you everything you need to know. Laney College has the second highest ratio of homelessness at 28%, which is really high. 30.2% of Peralta students are homeless. Peralta Community College District Report, Spring 2017, Food and Housing Survey presentation by Ann Warner.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Monique.
Hello.
Alright, so housing insecurity.
1 second. So Monique will be presenting the data, collected and presented by Anna Warner.
Yes, thank you. The data source for this display is from the November 2017 Peralta Community College District Report of Spring 2017 Student Food and Housing Survey, written by
Vanessa Mercado.
The number of students surveyed were 603 district-wide and 57 at Laney College. For these questions on the survey, what is incredible about the data is that when we look at wealthier a student is experiencing any form of housing insecurity, it is affecting 85% of Laney College students who participated in the survey. Homelessness. The data source for this display is from November 2017 Peralta Community College District Report of Spring 2017. Student Food and Housing Survey, written by Vanessa Mercado. The number of students served were 593 district-wide and 57 at Laney College. For these questions on the survey, almost a third of the students have experienced some form of homelessness district-wide, and more than a quarter of Laney students have experienced it at Laney College. The number of students who responded to this part of the survey district-wide was 471. Of these 471, 57% of them said that their students were affected by the housing problems they experienced. 86.7% of those who responded that their studies were affected reported that they performed worse than they otherwise could have had they not experienced housing problems. Aaron Price, from homelessness vet to acceptance at UC Berkeley. Joined the Navy after high school and discharged homelessness and sleeping in my car. Laney College extended opportunity programs and services EOPS program, CARE, and CalWorks program. The Umoja Mbaka students attending UC Berkeley.
Thank you. I just want to highlight that these students put this slideshow together in a week. And I'd like to again thank Ms. Anna Warner for presenting, for collecting slides regarding Peralta students overall as well.
Thank you. My name is Sandy Perry. I'm a Christian minister at Sham Deliverance Ministry in San Jose, California, and we have actually been serving the homeless and fighting side by side with the homeless for 28 years in San Jose. And it's interesting, we have a group of students at San Jose State called the Student Homeless Alliance, and they've documented over 4,000 homeless students at San Jose State University. So this is actually San Jose. People may not be aware of it, but Silicon Valley is like the epicenter of homelessness in the Bay Area, and it's not a coincidence that it's the epicenter of technology and the epicenter of homelessness are in the same place, because all the technology that's being developed is being developed for private property, private profit for corporations, and not for the benefit of the people. You can ask Google, who recently moved into San Jose, and they've been buying up all the property. They're doing land banking and buying all the property in sight in the downtown area, and it's driving the housing prices up through the roof. And as a result, a lot of the young people feel that there's absolutely no future, and they were forced, when this came to city council, they were forced to actually chain themselves to their chairs in order to be heard by the San Jose City Council. And even then, they were ignored. They were arrested, and the city council went ahead and sold the money to Google anyway. We've been fighting a rent control battle the same way other people around the Bay Area have in San Jose, in Milpitas, in Mountain View, but these are basically defensive battles. We're fighting for rents that people can afford, whereas the landlords are fighting for unlimited rents. And we have to find a way to begin to go over to the kind of world that we want to build, the kind of cooperative society that we can believe in, and you know, one that's governed by love, brotherhood, sisterhood, and people working together. And part of that is some of the discussions we've been having in the housing movement is that landlords actually should be outlawed and housing should be free. We have the technology and the wealth to provide housing for free in this society, and we should do it. And it's not outrageous. They're actually having marches in Berlin to ban their landlords. And so we should take a lesson from them and start thinking about that. I've been to so many rent control hearings and heard landlords crying. Have you ever heard a landlord cry? It's terrible. It's just awful. And we should take them out of their misery by taking their housing away and giving it to people.
My name is Stacy, and I am an Alameda County resident, and I'm speaking from the cycle of homelessness that I've been through. I also have a very good job. I am not middle class, but I'm not, well, I am poor now, according to their definition of income. I am a mother, a single mother. I have been through the cyclops of housing, but I also support my parents. I work with families. I support them in getting the systems to work for them, but I can't benefit from the systems. I have applied for every single housing list that comes out. I've never made a lottery. I've never even had my number. Matter of fact, I don't even think I had, no, we haven't accepted you, or whether you made the listing or not. My son is now 17. I thank God that he has been able to endure the housing situations that we've been through. For the last year after this accident, I've had to separate my son and live separate from my son. My son has been commuting from Union City to Berkeley, but I'm still trying to find housing, and even with the income loss, I still have a hard time finding housing. One thing is that they don't want to give us a chance. The expectations are too high. They don't want to give people that don't have 600 or 700 credit rating a chance to live. They don't want us to have any sort of sense of independence. You know, and it's really harmful because while I'm trying to support my son as well as my son's health, this impacts my health, my living, how I am able to endure or not endure. It has enabled me to heal healthy, fast, and able to get back to work so that I can make a little bit of money to even afford a hotel room for me and my son. So this is something, and I also encourage us all to get out and vote in our local elections, because this is where they get to make these decisions that we are not having a voice in them, because we sit in the back and we allow them to have their way.
We're next going to be talking about poverty and inequality.
So hi, my name is Peter. I'm a retired Laney teacher, and Michelle here and I are going to talk to you about two newspapers. Now, first a question. Are you going to hear about these questions and your struggle on Netflix? Are you going to hear about it on CBS or NBC or CNN? You're going to hear about it on Breitbart? No. So if you want to know where the people in your situation are struggling and doing things to change the world, you got to find a source. And we've got two of them for you. One of them, actually, I'd like you to talk about the Laney Tower first, if you would. It's a brilliant paper.
Hi, my name's Michelle Snyder. I've been one of the editors for the Laney Tower now 2 semesters. Actually, this is my 3rd semester. And the reason why I became a journalist, I didn't even really understand journalism before. But as soon as the election happened and there was violent rallies and protests and white nationalists and neo-Nazis landed right in the Bay Area, I'm from San Francisco, I never thought that would ever happen. I wanted to document it. I'm a photographer, a videographer, and when I realized what I was doing was I was documenting and spreading a word to tell people how dangerous this really was. And that resulted in actually footage going into PBS ProPublica, helping arrest actual white nationalists who had gone to Charlottesville to commit violence. And that is the power of local media and what we can do. It's not something that's really common. A lot of people will look at Trump or they'll look at this big picture in the White House, but they won't realize that a lot of our issues are right here. It's very important that we support local journalists who are reporting on the issues. In this issue right here of the Laney Tower, this is the one that those students just reported on the statistics. They used one of the articles that I wrote about student housing insecurities. It's something I'm passionate about writing about. Also education, because I believe community college should be not underestimated. It can be a future for us to improve our education system. We keep saying we need like trade schools or something to get people employed and working. Well, we have it right here. We have the resources.
There you go. There you go.
I just encourage everybody to pay attention to these local newspapers. If you're a student also, or even a faculty, and you have story ideas, you have a problem, let us know. And anybody can actually write for this.
Yes.
So, and anybody can write for that. It's very important to get our voices heard one way or another. Thank you.
Yeah.
The Tower is your voice at Laney College. The People Tribune is your voice nationally. You are invited to write for these papers.